I'm Hussein, and I'm going to get started with today's episode of the highlights that I review on a daily basis. The difference is that for the past few weeks, I've not been able to do this daily, at least not on video. I still do this daily, for myself, but not on video. And I thought I'll make it a point to make it today, even though it is little late in the day. I usually get this done early in the morning. But yeah, without spending any more time, let's get started with our first highlight from Guide to Organization Design. Go for flexibility rather than efficiency in the long run. This is at a time when I was focused on efficiency more than anything else in any design, and with my background as a software engineer, typically I would work on software design, and efficiency would reign supreme. And this highlight kind of flipped that for me. The realization that things are going to change. That's a realization in software world as well. I mean, at least for me, it's a mark of seniority to realize that software changes. So, whatever decisions, you may want to get to that ideal state in the software development, but then you have to realize that most software gets replaced. And so, same way over here, most organization designs get replaced due to factors outside your control anyway. It's not a failing of your initial design, it's just what the time demands. So it is more important to go for flexibility rather than efficiency in the long term. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. Moving on. The earned life. Unlike ambition, aspiration doesn't have a clearly marked finish line. It is a continuous process with an infinite time horizon. It defies measurement. It is an expression of our higher purpose. Our aspiring may change over time, but it doesn't go away, whether we articulate it or not. We stop aspiring when we stop breathing. The author is making differences, it's pointing out differences between three things. In this particular highlight, it's just two are mentioned, but the three things are action, ambition, and aspiration. So action has a very short term scope. If you're thinking of acting on something, it's right there. Ambition has a little longer area. You have well defined goals, and when you reach that, you've reached your ambition. And aspiration, like the author is pointing out over here, there is no clearly marked finish line. It can go on forever. We stop aspiring when we stop breathing. And I think rest of it is already mentioned over here. I think it's a really beautiful description of the of that notion. What is the difference between ambition and aspiration? And it is true. Now I come to realize that I've often mixed them up. It is useful to have a different set of words to describe different things, right? And that's why this sort of difference, having a definition for ambition versus aspiration, it's a very useful heuristic. It's a very useful measure to kind of label them separately so that we know what we're talking about. When I'm referring to my ambitions, I know that they have a finished line, and I'm probably going to feel good temporarily once I reach my ambition, but then invariably I'll feel uh, forlorn. And I'll feel disappointed. That feeling of is there all is this all there is? Sorry. And that's where aspiration kicks in. Aspiration keeps giving us our higher purpose. So let's move on. Kill it with fire. Don't build for scale before you have scale. Build something that you will have to redesign later, even if that means building a monolith to start. Build something wrong and update it often. This, I think, marries perfectly to the first highlight we discussed about flexibility in organization design. And as it happens, I mentioned software design over there, and we have a very similar concept in software design as well. It's really talking about the same thing. Very often we as engineers, we think of scale when we don't even have scale. We don't even have a single user, and we're thinking of scale. We're thinking of things like Kubernetes and horizontal scaling and multi-region failovers and stuff like that. It's more important to build something that you'll have to redesign later. Building even if that means building a monolith to start. And actually, that's the argument in the book as well, and that's something that I've found out in myself as well, that monoliths have their place. and you don't even know what are the things that will need scale going forward. So how are you going to design for scale right now? So build something wrong and update it often. And that's actually not wrong at all. You're building with the best information you have right now, but you're building something, right? And yes, it'll turn out that okay, this was something wrong, but it's not really wrong in that sense, right? You worked on the best information you had, and now you're updating it often so that when the times have changed, when the situation has changed, now you understand the problem space better, when you understand your audience better, and now you can update it often. So flexibility is the king over here. You're as long as you're aiming to update it often enough, you're all set. Let's go on. Again, kill it with fire. Breaking up the monolith into services that roughly correspond to what each team owns means that each team can control its own deploys. Development speeds up. Add a layer of complexity in the form of formal testable API specs, and the system can facilitate communication between those teams by policing how they are allowed to change downstream interactions. Right. So this is just like a guideline of how we're going to break a monolith into services. And I think that the key takeaway here is that roughly correspond to what each team owns. That's the key takeaway over here. So you're not building services for the sake of building services, or like you're theoretically breaking down a unit into different services and saying that okay, uh, uh, even if it's the same team that's going to work on two different services, you're just going to have two different services. The real value of having this services oriented architecture is that each team can control their own deployment status. So it's the team that's a central focus point over here. It also goes back to that Conway's law, where the software roughly mirrors the organization design. So the teams that make a part, the teams that make up your whole, like the whole set of teams behind the software system. That's the one that's going to. That's how the architecture is also going to turn out to be. I think I messed up a lot of words over there, but I think you get the picture. So yeah, it's just a series of steps in moving from a monolith to services when you have to, and like that signal, that sign when you have to is when there are different teams and each team needs to control its own deploys. And yes, each team must control its own deploys. You can't depend on other teams for you to deploy your own services. So that the uh, at the time when you start having different teams, that is when you should start moving towards the service oriented architecture. So of course, plan upfront, but yes, the actual implementation is at that time. Moving on, measure what matters. The key to satisfaction is to set aggressive goals, achieve most of them, pause to reflect on the achievement, and then repeat the cycle. Learning from direct experience, a Harvard Business School study found, can be more effective if coupled with reflection. That is, the intentional attempt to synthesize, abstract, and articulate the key lessons taught by experience. The philosopher and educator John Dewey went a step further. We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. So, really, the only highlight that I wanted over here was the last phrase: we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. But, to keep the context, I had to highlight the whole thing. And really, if you take that as a takeaway, we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on our experience. The whole thing becomes clear. I don't really need to repeat it anymore. And also, it's a very relevant reflection for me as well. Because it's one thing to have experience, but if you don't think about it again, you have done something and you're not reflecting on it in any form, then we don't really learn anything. So that is why things like retrospectives are important, and retrospectives done well, not just what went wrong, what could have been improved and stuff like that, but what did we learn from it, stuff like that. Moving on, drive. Perhaps it's time to toss the very word management onto the linguistic hash heap belongs alongside icebox and horseless carriage. This era doesn't call for better management; it calls for a renaissance of self-direction. Pretty straightforward, right? Yeah. The word management has been overloaded with such connotations, and it's almost a negative term today. I mean, of course, it's like the recent movement has seen management in a whole new light, and that's one of the things that has helped. is the availability of training resources. Like a lot of books, a lot of like this whole new realization that managers need to be trained. It's not just that some like you put your highest performers um, in a management position and they'll do well. They don't make good managers that way. So well, it's kind of like a mixed thing. I'm not really like I'm not really agreeing over here with this particular phrase, because, like I said, management is kind of regaining the original spirit of it. It's and it does mean self direction now. The modern management norms do include self direction, but yes, it's like this is what the author says. Moving on, 7.5 lessons about the brain. A mind is something that emerges from a transaction between your brain and your body, while they are surrounded by other brains in bodies that are immersed in a physical world and constructing a social world. So the author is distinguishing mind and brain over here, and points out that mind is not just your brain in your body, and that's a key thing over here. Your brain in your body, because uh, it's not just the brain that does all the thinking. It's like all the organs in your body, they drive the inputs. Sorry, they send the inputs, and it's kind of driven. The way it acts is very very strange. In fact, there is an upcoming read about this. I'm forgetting the book's name, but it kind of makes, like, from the synopsis I gather, it makes the same point that um, excuse me, it makes the point that our mind stretches out in our body. It's not just like a transactional relationship where our organs are sending inputs and brain is analyzing it. No, the everything works together. Like the whole prediction mechanism and the whole routine that the brain needs to go through to and like the end goal is keeping our bodies healthy. Like surviving essentially. Anyway, like moving on. But mind is a little bit more than that also. It's also, while they're surrounded by other brains in bodies that are immersed in a physical world and that constructs a social world, that is what mind. That's where the mind emerges from. It's a very poignant realization. I possibly can't do justice over here. Let's move on. Student focus. This is reading. If you weren't letting your mind wander a little bit right now, you won't really be reading this book in a way that would make sense to you. Having enough mental space to roam is essential for you to be able to understand a book. Um, this reminds me of that saying, about, like, it's a joke saying, about speed reading. So, like, this person says, I'm taking speed reading courses and I'm speed reading. Uh, what is that book? War and Peace. Um, I'm okay. I think I messed up the joke. I forgot the book's name. Um, yeah. So anyway, so it's like the point is, we can definitely focus entirely onto something, and the idea is, like the author is talking about reading over here. If you're focusing too much on the reading experience, you're not really thinking. I mean, you need to have a little bit space for your mind to wander, to do a little bit of thinking, to do a little bit of daydreaming. And that's my experience, like I'm reading a book and suddenly I'm daydreaming of something. I'm probably like 2 pages behind in my thinking. And then I have to catch up and see, okay, like, I've probably not read any of these things at all. But that's reading. It means rereading. It means going over the paragraphs you've read again and again, and your mind is essentially daydreaming. That's when you know that you're actually able to absorb the material from the book. Um, what I'm doing right now is also another one of the. It's one of the tactics I'm using to absorb better, or retain better from a book. This highlights that I'm reviewing. It kind of reminds where I was when I was reading this book, and it brings back those ideas to me. So I know, yes, I'm publishing this and I'm putting it on as video, and of course I keep an eye on how many views each video has. But really, that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this, and like this is really a subject of another video. But I'm doing this because I can retain this better, and in a very similar way, as this highlight points out, you need to have a little bit flexibility, a little bit of space for your mind to wander while you're reading. Moving on, the science of overcoming procrastination. Making the threshold for getting started relatively low can trick your mind into getting motivated for a task. The low threshold suggests to you that the task is completely manageable, and anticipating that you will easily get past the first hurdle of the task will help you boost positive emotions in relation to the work you need to do. Okay, I think um, this is kind of like a very technical way of saying this. It's really about making it very very easy to start something, to begin something. And I know in myself, whenever I'm about to start something, I'm thinking of a lot of different things, and that raises the threshold so high that I'll never really get started. And that's the perfectionist tendency, which, like, which I've said before, I'm trying to overcome. So the idea, and that's why I have highlighted this. The excuse me. Yeah, the idea is that you reduce the threshold, you make it easy to begin tasks so that, uh, like, what's the word here? Um, yeah, it'll help you boost positive emotions. And one more thing, yeah, trick your mind into getting motivated for a task. So if you reduce the threshold, if you reduce the expectations that it has to be perfect on the first go, which is actually a ridiculous, like, I'm telling this to myself more than anyone else. It's a ridiculous notion that the thing has to be perfect outright. I'm not even going to release it. Like, sometimes I'm overwhelmed with this feeling that, okay, no, I think that this has to be perfect. Even with the first commit I make, it has to be perfect, and that just means that I'm not going to start anything, right? And that's why this is a good reminder for me. Moving on, AI 2041. One major obstacle to achieving these experiences is content creation. Content creation in an XR environment is similar to creating a complex 3D game. It must encompass all permutations of user choices, model the physics of real and virtual objects, simulate the effects of light and weather, and deliver lifelike renderings. Uh, I feel that not there's not much to say over here. Um, Content creation in 3D, it's a challenging thing, because, like, permutations of user choices in 3D space is really really complicated. Like, this book is about, like, there are about 10 stories or something, which is kind of imagining what the world would look like in 2041 with the AI revolution and all of that. It's a pretty interesting book. The stories are nice. It's not like, the stories serve as a way to teach what AI was going to look like, what the different technologies are and everything, right? But in any case, they are well written stories. It's not like, stories which are just written for the sake of uh, conveying some theory. They are decent stories. It's not like, they're not like excellent classics or something like that, but they're nice stories, and they do the job of delivering all of this information. That brings us to the end of the highlights today. It's like I said, I'm taking it slow, and 18 minutes, it's little rather long, but still, yeah, that's what it is today. Well, you have a good day. Thank you.